What happens when the CEO walks in dressed as an old man and the only person who treats him right is the one at the bottom? Elijah Jensen stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing himself. Gray wig, liver spots, slouched posture, large glasses, and a faded cardigan. He looked like someone's grandpa, not the 42-year-old owner of a multi-million-dollar diner chain. 18 locations across 3 states. He inherited the business from his father, who started with a single truck stop cafe 30 years ago. Elijah had spent his 20s in the back offices, managing numbers, expanding the brand. But lately, the numbers weren't adding up. Customer satisfaction was dropping at a few locations. One in particular, Store 11, a high-traffic diner on the edge of a retirement community, had been getting frequent complaints. Nothing specific enough to fire anyone, but something felt off. He decided to see it himself. No warning. No cameras. No corporate badge. He walked into the diner just after noon, hunched over a wooden cane, moving slow. The lunch rush buzzed around him. Servers passed by without looking. The hostess stand stood empty. He waited by the door. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. Still no one. A tall man in a black shirt, manager, judging by the earpiece, walked by, glanced at him, then kept going. Finally, a young guy in his early 20s jogged over from the back. "Hey, sorry about that, sir," he said, placing a hand gently on Elijah's arm. "Come on, let me get you a booth." Elijah grunted and nodded, letting the boy help him to a table near the window. "I'm Mason," he said, handing over a menu. "Water okay to start?"
"Yes."
"Thank you," Elijah rasped, keeping his voice raspy and soft. "Busy today?" "Always is. Short 2 servers today. One quit, one called in," Mason said, glancing toward the kitchen. "But we'll take care of you." He brought the water, then returned a minute later with a pad. Elijah ordered the grilled chicken and mashed potatoes. As Mason left, Elijah watched the room. One woman at the counter had been waiting 15 minutes for a refill. A family at a booth flagged down a server, only to be waved off. The manager stood near the kitchen, talking on his phone, not stepping in. Mason, meanwhile, zipped from table to table, apologizing, clearing plates, taking orders, even running food. Halfway through his meal, Elijah set down his fork and looked around again. A couple near him had been sitting with empty plates and no check for at least 10 minutes. "Excuse me," Elijah said softly as Mason passed. "Yeah, what's up?" "You're working hard." Mason gave a tired smile, trying to keep up. He started to walk off, then paused. "Hey, sir, you got room for dessert? It's on the house." Elijah blinked. "I didn't ask for anything." "You didn't have to," Mason said. "You've been patient. You're kind. We don't get that a lot these days. I'll bring you a slice of apple pie." Elijah sat back, stunned. Nobody had ever offered him anything like that in this place. Not when he walked in wearing a suit and tie. Not when he came in as himself. 10 minutes later, Mason returned with a pie and a scoop of vanilla ice cream on top. "Here you go, sir. Best thing we got." Elijah took a bite. Warm, flaky, perfect. But before he could say anything, a sharp voice cut through the room. "Mason!" The manager stormed over. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "You comped another dessert? It's just one slice, Rick." "I don't care. That comes out of our margins. You don't give away free stuff unless I approve it." Mason's face hardened. "He's an elderly customer. He's been sitting here quietly while we're slammed. It's a small gesture." "You're not paid to make gestures," Rick snapped. "You're paid to follow the rules. Do it again, and you'll be off the schedule next week." Mason clenched his jaw, but nodded. "Understood." Rick stomped off toward the back. Elijah looked up at Mason, who offered a weak smile.
"Sorry about that."
"Enjoy your pie." He walked off before Elijah could say anything. Elijah sat there, heart pounding. He'd seen enough. Not everything, but enough to know this wasn't just about slow service. It was about culture, leadership, and this manager, Rick, had just shown him exactly what the problem was. He finished the pie, stood slowly, and walked out without saying another word. But he would be back. Not as an old man next time. As himself. Elijah sat in his rental car across the street from the diner the following morning, watching the staff filter in through the employee entrance. It was still early, barely past 5:30, but the kitchen lights were already on. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a delivery truck idling by the side door. He hadn't slept much. The image of Mason being reprimanded for showing basic decency kept playing in his head. He'd made some calls after leaving the day before. Quietly, without alerting anyone at the regional level. There were no formal complaints logged against the manager, Rick, but the store had lost 4 front of house employees in the last 6 weeks.
2 had left mid-shift. No exit interviews.
Just vanished. He stepped out of the car and crossed the lot, this time in a pressed navy shirt, jeans, and a new name tag. Elliot Trainee. He'd arranged to be placed on the schedule as a new hire through a third-party staffing partner his company used for temporary coverage. On paper, he was another body to help cover short-staffed mornings. In practice, he was here to see the truth unfiltered. Inside, the air smelled of burnt toast and fryer oil. A line cook in his 40s stood behind the grill, flipping bacon onto a tray with headphones in. No one looked up. Elijah found a clipboard on the counter labeled Trainee's Initial Assignments. His name was scribbled next to a note, Dish room until further notice. As he pushed through the swinging door into the back, a wave of humid heat hit him. The dish pit was already piled high. Trays of crusted plates, cups with dried creamer rings, silverware dumped like scrap metal. A kid with a buzz cut and red hoodie stood at the sink, elbow deep in suds. "You the new guy?" he asked without turning.
Yeah.
"Elliot." "Brandon," the kid said, jerking his chin toward a pair of gloves and an apron hanging on a hook. "Grab those. Rinse, stack, load. That's it." Elijah suited up and got to work, keeping his head down. The rhythm came back faster than he expected. He'd done this exact job in his father's diner when he was 17. The clatter of plates, the sting of hot steam, the endless cycle of clean, dirty, clean again, it hadn't changed. By 6:15, the breakfast rush was building. Servers darted in and out, shouting orders, grabbing mugs, dumping dishes faster than he and Brandon could keep up. A tall woman with dark curls and a sharp voice barked from the pass window. "Where's the clean flatware?" "We're out on the floor." Brandon rolled his eyes but said nothing. Elijah hurried to load the next rack. A few minutes later, the swinging door burst open and Rick stepped in. Same black shirt, same earpiece. "What's the delay back here?" he snapped. "We've got people waiting at tables with no silverware." Elijah opened his mouth, but Brandon cut him off. "We're running full speed. Maybe if we had a third guy." "Don't start," Rick shot back. "You had a third guy. He walked out last week because of this exact garbage. Now it's your problem." Brandon slammed a tray of cups onto the counter. One rolled off and smashed on the floor. "You want to write me up?"
Do it.
"I'm not doing this with 2 people on a 3-man job." Rick stepped forward, face tight. "I'll write you up twice if I need to. Don't test me, kid." Elijah cleared his throat. "Maybe if we rotated someone from the floor for 30 minutes, Rick turned on him. "You're the trainee. You don't make suggestions. You do what you're told." Brandon muttered something under his breath and returned to the sink. Elijah said nothing more. By 7:30, the dish room was barely keeping pace. Elijah's arms ached, and his shirt clung to his back. Brandon was sweating through his hoodie, working in silence. Elijah finally caught a break when a short woman in a green apron slid through the door with a tray of syrup bottles. "You must be Elliot," she said, offering a quick smile.
I'm Jody.
"I run mornings up front. Nice to meet you." Sorry nobody really trained you.
We're kind of.
In survival mode. He nodded. They told me you had restaurant experience. You holding up all right?
I'm managin'.
Jody glanced at the dish stack, then leaned in a bit. Don't take Rick personally. He's been here too long and thinks barking orders is leadership. Some of us just keep our heads down and focus on the customers. He appreciated her honesty. It was the first real moment of human connection since Mason the day before. Thanks, he said. You need help out front? She hesitated. Honestly? Yeah. But if I pull you, Rick'll throw a fit. Let's see how lunch goes. If it gets ugly, you might be more useful out there. By 10, the lull before lunch gave Elijah a moment to dry off and step into the main dining area. Most tables were clean, but the counters hadn't been wiped in a while. A woman in her 60s sat alone at a booth, looking around like she'd been waiting a long time. Elijah walked over. Ma'am, has someone helped you yet? She looked relieved.
No.
I've been here 15 minutes. I just need coffee and a menu. He nodded. I'll take care of it. He ducked behind the counter, found a clean cup, filled it, and brought it over. You're not one of the regular servers, she said. Just filling in, he replied. But I'll get someone to take your order right away. He turned and spotted Mason stepping out from the kitchen, apron tucked, hair damp from washing up. Their eyes met, but Mason didn't recognize him. He was clean-shaven now, no glasses, no wig. Just another guy on staff. Hey, Elijah said, approaching. There's a woman at booth 4 who hasn't been helped. Mason looked over, frowned. Booth 4's Jeannie's section. Should I tell her? I'll handle it. As Mason walked off, Jody appeared beside Elijah. Keep doing that, and you'll make the rest of us look bad, she teased. Seriously, though, thanks. Elijah started wiping down the counter. He watched as Mason returned to booth 4, not just to take the order, but to chat with the woman, laugh softly at something she said, refill her coffee before she even asked. It was the same thing he'd seen yesterday. Mason didn't just do the job. He cared. A commotion from the kitchen caught his ear. Raised voices. Elijah walked back and saw Rick standing toe-to-toe with a cook. I told you no substitutions on the senior menu unless I sign off. The cook, a thick-set man in a stained apron, gestured toward the order slip. It's scrambled eggs and fruit instead of pancakes. The woman's diabetic. I don't care. If we do it for her, we have to do it for everyone. Elijah stepped closer. She's a customer with a dietary issue. It's not like she asked for a filet mignon. Rick's head snapped toward him. Did I ask for your opinion? No, Elijah said calmly. But I'm giving it. Rick took a step forward, finger raised. One more word out of you, and you're done here. Mason appeared at his side before Elijah could respond. Rick, he said, voice steady. I'll cover the cost of the fruit myself. Just let it go. Rick turned his anger toward Mason now. You think this place runs on your wallet? No, Mason said, meeting his gaze. But it sure as hell doesn't run on your ego either. Silence. The kitchen staff froze. Even the cook stepped back. Rick's face flushed. You're off the schedule.
Now.
Get out. No, Elijah said sharply. He stays. Rick blinked. What did you just say? Elijah pulled the trainee badge off his shirt and held it up. My name is Elijah Jensen. I own this company.
The room went dead.
Rick's mouth opened, shut, then opened again. You what? I've been here for less than 2 days and I've seen enough. Berating staff, ignoring customers, punishing employees for doing the right thing? You're done, Rick. Get your things and leave this building. Effective immediately. Rick stood stunned, then stormed to the back office without a word. Elijah turned to Mason. You all right? Mason nodded slowly.
Yeah.
I didn't think anyone was watching. I was. You're exactly who we need running this place. The cook muttered under his breath. About damn time. Elijah looked around the room. Real people, real work, held together by duct tape and grit. And one guy who'd gone out of his way to offer pie to a stranger. He knew now, the problem hadn't been the store. It had been the leadership. And that was about to change. The office door clicked shut behind Rick, and the sound echoed through the narrow hallway like a final note. Elijah stood still for a moment, his pulse steady, gaze fixed on the back wall lined with faded safety posters and a crooked staff schedule. The silence that followed wasn't shock, it was relief. The kind that settles in after a storm finally breaks. He turned to face the kitchen team, who had returned to their stations with quiet, deliberate movements. No one spoke, but something invisible had shifted. Not celebration, there was no time for that, but a subtle straightening of backs, a renewed focus. Mason stood near the dry storage door, rubbing his palms against his apron, watching Elijah closely. "You said I should stay," Mason said. "Does that mean I'm not fired?" "I meant every word," Elijah replied. "But I won't force it. If you want to walk, I'd understand." Mason shook his head once. "Not walking. Just trying to figure out what this means." "It means we're going to rebuild," Elijah said. "From the floor up. Starting now." He stepped into the dining room, where Jody was helping a young hostess wipe down the front counter. She glanced up, eyebrows raised. "I need you in the office. I want to go over schedules and head count," Elijah said. "We're adjusting coverage immediately." Jody nodded and handed the rag to the hostess. "Keep working that side. I'll be back." Elijah waited until they were both inside the small office, bare walls, a metal desk, a battered corkboard with last month's sales numbers pinned askew. He pulled the schedule from the wall and studied it. "You're listed as front of house lead, but your hours are inconsistent." "Why?" "Rick didn't like strong personalities," Jody said, folding her arms. "If you questioned how he did things, your hours got cut. Quiet people got more shifts." He pointed to several blank spaces. "These gaps, this is where we're bleeding. And it's not just short staffing. It's mismanagement." "I've been saying that for months," Jody said. "But it's hard to push back when you're worried about your rent." "You're going back to full-time," Elijah said. "Effective this week. We'll bring in a couple of floaters from nearby stores to cover until we hire. I'll have HR fast-track it." Jody blinked, then exhaled. "That'll help. We've been running on fumes. We'll also need someone to take inter-management duties. I want Mason in that role, if he's willing." Jody tilted her head. "He's good with people. Not just customers. Staff trust him." Then it settled. Back on the floor, the late morning crowd had begun to thin. A few retirees lingered over toast and newspapers. Mason was clearing a corner booth when Elijah approached. "We're going to need someone with a steady hand up front," Elijah said. "You've got a natural instinct for it." Mason gave a cautious nod. "You're saying I'd be running the shift? Until we find someone permanent. I want her voice in how this place operates." Mason looked toward the back, then slowly sat on the edge of the booth. "I've never managed anything beyond my own tables. You've led by example. That's more than I can say for the guy we just let go. I don't want a title if I can't make changes." "Then let's talk about what needs to change." Mason leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "We need prep cooks. The line's falling behind because they're doing morning prep and breakfast service at the same time. Also, the dishwasher station, if we can't staff it properly, we need to rotate servers in for 10-minute shifts during slow periods." "Brandon's burning out," he spoke up earlier. Seemed like someone who's used to not being heard. "He's been covering that pit alone most days. Doesn't say much, but when he does, it's usually worth listening to. I'll talk to him myself." They stood and made their way to the back, but Brandon wasn't at the sink. Instead, Elijah found him outside by the dumpsters, sitting on an overturned milk crate, sleeves pushed up, shirt soaked through. "You on break?" Elijah asked. Brandon looked up, startled. "Didn't think anyone noticed." "You've earned it." Brandon stood. If you're here to tell me I shouldn't talk back to managers, I get it. I'll keep my head down. I'm here to ask if you'd stay, Elijah said. We're making changes. You have backup during peak shifts. And we're reviewing pay rates for back of house. It's overdue. Brandon's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but not the flat expression he usually wore either. I'll stay. But I'm not babysitting another useless manager. You won't have to. By lunchtime, word had traveled. The staff moved with something close to focus, not speed, exactly, but coordination. Jody was working the register. Mason was checking in on tables, and for the first time in weeks, no one was shouting in the kitchen. Elijah took a seat at the same window booth he'd sat in 2 days before. The one where Mason had first offered him pie, without knowing who he was. This time, a different server approached. I saw you here yesterday, she said, setting down a menu. Didn't realize you were with corporate. I wasn't yesterday, Elijah said. I was just observing. She glanced around the room. It feels different today. Because it is. She nodded once, then walked off to check another table. As the room settled into its midday rhythm, a commotion near the entrance drew Elijah's attention. A delivery driver was arguing with the new hostess, a teenager barely out of high school. I don't care what your clipboard says, the driver barked. I've got 3 other stops. The girl looked overwhelmed, eyes darting toward the back. Elijah stood and walked over. Is there a problem? The driver turned. This order was supposed to be signed for 20 minutes ago. Then we'll handle it now, Elijah said. No need to raise your voice. The driver muttered something under his breath, scrawled a signature pad, and left without another word. Elijah turned to the hostess. What's your name? Skylar, she said quietly. You did fine. Just bring things like this to Jody or Mason next time. Skylar gave a small nod. I didn't know who to go to. Before, if we asked Rick for help, he'd just say it wasn't his job. It is now, Elijah said. If someone speaks to you like that again, you come find me or either of them. Understood? She nodded again, this time more firmly. Back at the booth, his coffee had gone cold, but he didn't care. The pieces were starting to fall into place, not perfectly, not instantly, but enough to see the path forward. Later that afternoon, after the rush had passed, Elijah gathered the staff in the dining room. No speeches. Just facts. I've seen what you've been working through, he said. And I'm not proud that it took coming here like this to understand it. But I'm here now. We're rebuilding this store. Hiring, training, and investing where it counts. That starts with people.
No aplausos.
Just quiet attention. It was enough. He turned to Mason. You're leading the next few weeks of transition. Jody's supporting you. I'll be back regularly. Not in disguise. Not unannounced. Just present. Mason nodded. We'll hold the line. As the staff dispersed, Elijah stayed behind, watching the light shift through the front windows. It was still the same building, the same scuffed floors, the same coffee-stained counters. But the people inside were different now. Not because they'd changed, but because someone had finally listened. And that was only the beginning. By the end of the week, the diner wasn't fixed, but it was breathing again. Elijah had stayed on site, quietly observing the shifts, stepping in where needed, and conducting off-the-clock one-on-ones with each staff member in the cramped break room.
No cameras. No notepads.
Just him, a cup of coffee, and a chair pulled up beside theirs. He didn't ask them to pitch ideas or flatter the company. He asked them how they were doing, not just inside the store, but outside it. Most were hesitant at first. A few asked whether the meeting would affect their hours. One waitress, a single mom who picked up double shifts on weekends, spent 10 minutes talking about her schedule before finally admitting she hadn't taken a full day off in 3 months. He took notes only after they left, writing down what needed to change and who needed to be heard more often. On Friday morning, before the breakfast service, Elijah called everyone in early.
No aprens. No tras.
Just a staff meeting in the dining area, coffee and bagels on the side counter. The lights were dimmed low, windows still fogged from the morning dew. Mason stood near the register, arms lightly crossed, next to Jody, who looked like she hadn't stopped moving since Wednesday, but had an alertness to her that wasn't there before. Elijah stood in front of the pass window, arms at his sides. "I don't believe in town halls where nothing changes," he said. "So I'm not here to talk. I'm here to show you what's already set in motion." He turned to Jody. "You're now officially assistant manager, with full scheduling discretion. That means if the floor's short, you can make the call to bring someone in. No more waiting for regional approvals." Jody didn't react right away, just nodded slowly, eyes scanning the faces around her as if checking whether they were hearing it too. "Mason," Elijah continued, "your interim leadership has already had an impact. Customer satisfaction surveys are up 20%. You've corrected 3 inventory issues without being asked. Effective Monday, you're being promoted to general manager of this location. Full title, full salary." Mason blinked once and looked down. "I don't know if I'm ready to manage a full team." "You already are," Elijah said. "The title just makes it official." Then he turned to the group. "We're also bringing in 2 new hires from other locations starting next week, one for the dish station, one for prep. Brandon won't be working alone anymore." Brandon, leaning against the side wall, let out a short breath and gave a single nod. He hadn't spoken much since the confrontation earlier that week, but he'd started staying past his shift to train the newer hires without being asked. Elijah stepped aside and reached into a folder on the counter. "These are revised pay stubs," he said. "Some of you haven't had a performance review in over a year. We've retroactively adjusted wages based on tenure and task load. These rates start now, not next payroll." A soft murmur passed through the group. No one clapped. No one cheered. They just stood a little straighter. Elijah raised his voice slightly. "I didn't come here to catch people doing things wrong. I came here because I stopped trusting the filtered version of this business. That was my mistake. I let a layer of management convince me everything was fine when it wasn't. I saw a culture that rewarded silence over courage. That ends today." He made eye contact with each person as he spoke. "You all kept this place afloat through poor leadership, bad coverage, and long hours. You gave more than you were asked for, and you deserve more in return." He paused. "But I also want to be clear, this isn't a one-week fix. We still have gaps. We're still short-staffed. The next month won't be easy, but you're not alone in it anymore." He stepped back and nodded toward Mason. "It's yours now." Mason stepped forward, visibly uneasy with the attention. He cleared his throat, glancing once at Jody, who gave a subtle nod. "I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers," he said. "But I know what it feels like to be ignored. So, if you've got a problem, you come to me. If I can't fix it, I'll find someone who can. But I won't let it sit. That's my promise." He looked toward Skylar, the new hostess who had struggled earlier in the week. "And if you're new here or still learning, you're not on your own. We're not doing that anymore. No more trial by fire." She gave a small, grateful smile, then looked down at her shoes. After the meeting, the staff returned to their stations, quieter than usual but with a focus that didn't require direction. Elijah stayed near the counter, sipping coffee, watching the new rhythm take shape. During the lunch rush, a family with 2 toddlers came in, their stroller blocking the entryway. Instead of waiting awkwardly, they were greeted instantly. Skylar helped the mom navigate the booth, while Jody pulled a high chair from the back. Mason took their order himself, kneeling slightly to talk to the kids. Near the dish station, Brandon worked steadily, but this time with a second pair of hands beside him, a trainee named Luis, transferred from store 12, who asked questions without fear of being snapped at. Brandon didn't say much, but when Luis dropped a glass by accident and looked panicked, Brandon calmly handed him the broom without a word. By mid-afternoon, Elijah stepped outside for a breather. The air was cool, the sky beginning to shift into late-day amber. He leaned against the brick wall and closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the soft clatter of plates and muffled voices through the glass. Footsteps approached. Mason stood beside him, arms crossed. "I don't really know what I'm doing," he said. "I'm figuring it out as I go." Elijah kept his eyes forward. "So did my father. So did I." Mason exhaled slowly. "You think we'll hold it together?" "You already are." Mason nodded once. "I don't want to be the kind of manager people tiptoe around." "Then don't be. Just stay visible. Stay consistent. And listen twice as much as you talk." A pause. "You're not going to disappear again, are you?" Mason asked. Elijah looked at him.
No.
"I'm setting up a quarterly rotation. I'll visit each location."
Not as CEO.
"Just as someone who needs to understand what's happening on the floor." Mason gave a half laugh. "That's going to rattle some cages." "It should." They went back inside. The late shift was easing in and the crowd was thinning. Elijah took his usual booth by the window, but this time, no one ignored him. Skylar brought him coffee without being asked. "On the house," she said. "Well, Mason said you still pay, but I'm pretending it's on the house." He chuckled. "Fair enough." He watched the staff move, different people, same space, same uniforms. But now there was something else. A low hum of accountability paired with trust. Not blind obedience. Not fear of punishment. Just people doing their jobs knowing they'd be backed up if they stumbled. As evening settled and the lights dimmed, Elijah gathered his things. Before he left, he walked up to Mason, who was reviewing checks at the counter. "One more thing," Elijah said. Mason looked up. "Next time a customer earns a free pie," Elijah said, "don't hesitate. Just do it." Mason smiled. "You sure? That could really cut into our margins." "I'll risk it." He stepped out into the cooling night, the door swinging shut behind him.
No disguise.
No performance. Just a man walking away from a diner that had finally remembered what it meant to serve with dignity, with care, and with leadership that showed up when it counted.